My contemporaries, like Wes, for instance, and anybody, other sources. And I learned to have a first aid kit, but I had to carry her 6 miles back to the truck, which, again, I'm one of those not exactly in shape kind of guys. So I did a little research, and I bought a backpack sling for a dog. If your dog gets injured, you put 4 legs through it, you strap it on, and you can carry your dog back to your vehicle. Because at 59 years old, I really don't trust myself to carry much of anything back to the vehicle except my gun. A couple years ago, I just took one dog to North Dakota, and she tore up her feet in short order. Booties saved my entire trip. Now, I don't use them unless I have the injury, because the dogs don't like them. But once you start hunting, they'll ignore them. At least mine will. I have short hairs. And that's a couple of them. I have an older dog. She's 11 now. And glucosamine supplements have made a world of difference for us in recovering from a hunt. She had an injury at one point in her wrist, and after she hunted, she would be limping around the house for 2 or 3 days. Larry Elmore turned me on to these things, and they get them every day now. My dogs live in the house, so their pads don't have the benefit of a concrete run and that kind of thing, but that's just the way I like it, to each his own. And the last thing second to last thing I'm gonna throw out there is another one of our NAVDA members uses hoof flex on his dog's pads after every hunt out west. And it's antifungal, antibacteria, anti-everything, smells like pine. And he's a colleague of Wes's at NC State, Jesse Grimes, and he's a poultry professor. Anyway, I started asking him to put this on my dog's feet, and we made the whole week with no booties. So if your dog, if you need something to put on your dog's pads, this hoof flex, and you use Mushers, what's it called?
Musher Secret.
Musher Secret, yeah. And this is not necessarily a pad hardener. It keeps them pliable, and if they get chafed before they get hamburger, and it keeps the chafing to a minimum. And I'll leave them out here if you want to take a picture of them. Go ahead. And the last thing, after years of unmuffled gun blasts and 10 years of work at Concert Security in Chapel Hill, my hearing sucks. And I used to wear muffs, stereo muffs, which are okay in a deer stand, but when you're walking on a prairie or something, they get kind of old. I found these Axle earplugs that go over the ear and insert, and they come with different size, whatever these are called. What are these? Bud sizes. Yeah. Anyway, I use a safety pin to anchor them to my shirt, because one time they came off and slid down the back of my shirt, and I thought I lost them. So that was a lesson learned. But anyway, those are just a few things that I wish I'd have known a while back. And I learned from experienced bird dog people, and I just wanted to share them with y'all. And like I said, Jim will have this permit hunt stuff Monday in his email, and he'll make it available. But I went quail hunting one time last year, again on a Halifax game land, and we moved 3 coveys in 4 hours, and which to me is pretty good hunting. And I know Wes he's moved a lot more birds than I have, but anecdotally, from fishing and deer hunting and everything else, I hear more birds now than I did a few years ago. Just, and maybe I'm crazy. I think maybe the coyotes moving in are eating some of the egg stealers, that prey on eggs and biddies and poults and stuff. But, I'm not being paid to say this, but I haven't given up on wild quail. And I'm glad that you guys are here, and I'm glad that Jim put this together. It's especially gratifying to see women in the crowd, being a father of 3. I'm a little biased. But anyway, thanks for being here. Thanks for supporting hunting. And Dee, I'm good.
Thank you, Mike.
Yep. Nope. I'm gonna take it with me.
I usually like to see the screen too, 'cause that way it keeps me on track. What might that be?
That might be a microphone for your shirt.
No, one thing I don't need is a microphone.
They're recording it.
Oh, okay.
Man, do what you're told.
I was going to say that might like blow up or something.
Golly. Some people's kids.
Yeah, I would think that camera could hear me all the way back there.
Hell, Ellaby can hear you.
Okay, folks, yeah, and I'll try to tone it down. I typically have that like speaker voice, so it can be really annoying up close. Kind of, you're already been warned. But it's part of that passion that everybody gets into when they're talking about hunting that we've seen here tonight. So I am the Hunter Engagement Coordinator. Started out as Hunting Heritage Biologist and Wildlife Management. Then it was changed to R3 Hunting Specialist, and the argument there was not everybody knows what R3 is. So finally, Hunter Engagement Coordinator, and we also have an Angler Engagement Coordinator. So these positions, I want to say, are 20-some years old, and they started with the precipitous decline in hunting. So really, my presentation is going to be twofold. It's going to be about public land, which most we've already heard about between Garrett and Wes, and then I'm going to try to tie it to the website. And the second part of that is talking about what's involved in my job, why we're doing it, some opportunities too for new hunters. So again, these positions are relatively new. 40 years ago, they didn't exist. Most people already came to us for their hunting license, their fishing license, or their boating vessel registration types of things. But now we are forced to be marketers like everybody else. So as I like to say, the journey is the destination. I have a wanderlust. It is said that wild things and humans take the path of least resistance. I don't. My hunting has always been a labor of love, and I'll wander around till I find what I'm looking for. And so I've always liked public land because I had more room to roam. I hunted one private piece of land up in my home state of Pennsylvania. My brother got me in there, and it was a very good hunting spot for deer. But what I didn't like about it is I felt restricted. On many of our game lands, as you already heard, about 2 million acres. There's lots of room to roam, and that's what I typically like. So, moving on. I like to think within the hunting realm, hunters are kind of like a bell curve. So, for example, you start here with the casual hunter, where competing interests dominate, meaning if there's something else to do or you're required to do it, you're going to do it. Well, one of the biggest competing interests to hunting is WORK. And in about 2 years, I'm going to be moving on from that. But of course, I plan on being back in the sense of volunteering. But work for me, WORK, will be a radio station, or at least that's the intent. Then there's the moderate part-timer. That's a person that maybe takes off a week, a year, maybe a couple of days. But spectator sports and those things still rule out. Got to see the game. Like, let's see, go Lions. Yes. Okay, right. It never works with anybody else, but it does with Hannah. She's a Penn Stater. Then there's the dedicated 365. We live, eat, sleep, hunting. And when you're unsupervised, you can also be a retail therapist, which I happen to be. Like was mentioned by Garrett, I believe, about having so many shotguns. You never have too many. And here's the brief argument. And of course, there'll be plenty of time because I'll cruise through this first. If I'm online or in a sporting goods store and I already have a shotgun and I see another one or a rifle, it's very easy to say you don't need that. You already have a gun. But think of it this way. Every time you spend money on ammo, archery equipment, and firearms, that is a contribution to conservation. So then I'm immediately to say with my two names, Walter and Deet, what do you think, Walter? What do you think, Deet? And they say, who are you to deny conservation funding? Click, buy now. The number one question for the people I meet, and it's mostly people that did not grow up in hunting families. Unlike me, I was a cradle hunter, 1972, first license. I was 12 years old. These folks, brand new, they don't have a clue. So to them, where to hunting is typically number one. And Our goal as a state agency is to connect people to resources. That's why we are a resource commission. We are not a guide service. And so we make that very clear. And as most of you know that already hunt, we live in a world of instantaneous success, instant gratification. But hunting is the great equalizer. And if you spend time out there, you're going to have far more time where you don't, but enjoying that whole picture. So success isn't just harvesting game. It's spending time out in the outdoors. Days of your trip to Alabama. Again, when I started out, or even in the 80s, there wasn't the World Wide Web that everybody has today. So I plotted a trip to Alabama to turkey hunt. And I looked on the Gazetteer, and everywhere there was a road sign that connected, I wrote it on the back of that. Now, as you know, with all these navigation apps, it's too easy. But that's the way I started out. Now we don't pay attention, and we're starting to have cars that drive themselves, which is kind of dangerous, but it is what it is. As I always say, this Regulations Digest and the website, and by the way, since I'm hooked on spring gobblers, that was a spring, show of the turkey. And in fact, I will state this. I said it to Mike real quickly. Mike would always talk to me about quail and doves and woodcock, and I'm like, Mike, there only is one game bird. That is the wild turkey. But now I realize, okay,
You need a dog.
calm down, calm down. Don't give me something else to buy. But as my pelage continues to turn the hue that it is, it was like the old Prego spaghetti sauce commercial. It's in there. That means everything you need to know is in here. And this Regs Digest, who does not have a Regs Digest? And I wish I would have brought some. Okay, some people do not. It's something you got to read. It's a hard copy, or you can see it online, but you've got to go to the restroom, right? Take it there and leave it there. Because as you're going to hear me say, and it was alluded to earlier, let your fingers do the walking first before you put the boots on the ground. Just a few private land tips. We do, and I grew up with this, we do live in a state that caters to leases. And so it's hard to get access to private property, nor do we keep a list. But always request permission during the off season, not during the season, because if you look like this to a landowner, you're basically telling that landowner, I'm ready to hunt and I'm going to do it now, no matter what you say. So you go off in the off season. Respect their time, don't get into the long conversations. Offer incentives, chores, maintenance on the property. Sometimes that can get a foot in. Obviously, respect the property and others. No littering, no digging ruts with the vehicles. And don't expect permanent access. Reach out every year. And finally, as I discovered in workshops I was involved with NC State, one of the biggest concerns with landowners is liability. We live in a litigious world. Nowadays, hunters, through different entities, and all it takes is that simple Google, you can get personal liability insurance. And sometimes that may or may not make the difference. Moving on, as you already heard in that black bar, everything you need to know is right in there. And as I often tell folks, do your due diligence. I had one gentleman that comes to continued programming that I'm involved in. Nearly everything that came up, he would email me. And I was kind at first, but then I said, look in the Regs Digest, that's where it is. So right here to hunting in North Carolina, chronic wasting disease, hunter education, before the hunt, after the hunt, what to hunt, where to hunt. It's spelled out. Those things did not exist back when we did not have the World Wide Web. So right here, two of my favorite places to go, and nearly every states have their own mapping programs, is the Interactive Game Lands Map and these downloadable geo-referenced PDFs. And you'll see why I say geo-reference. We already talked about the apps, but this is typically where I go. And even if somebody calls me up, and I get a lot of inquiries from folks that say, yeah, I'm from another state, I never hunted in North Carolina. Well, for the most part, for me, that doesn't pass the straight face test because of all the stuff that is online. Granted, if you're new to the state, I'm somewhat empathetic, but with what's available now, it makes it easy to get started. So moving on, obviously, and you already saw a screenshot, and the reason you see this one is because of our CWD areas now. And even though this isn't about deer hunting, make sure you do read information relative to that. It's important the agency's involved in it, and we want to make sure that doesn't spread. It wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when. So all those diamonds are game lands. Those are my and your hunting land. So if you blow it up a little bit in the map, you can see you can change your base map, so you can make it topographical and streets and everything else. Again, things that didn't exist. The other very exciting thing, and I won't get ahead of myself because I was getting excited. But anyway, blow it up, map even looks bigger, obviously a shot of the Yawaris. One of the first places that I turkey hunted, again, I'm getting back to those turkeys, I apologize, but it's become an obsession. I started out in New Bern as a wildlife technician on the coast, and it was about to be turkey season. I'm like, I don't like this flat land. I like to do this when I'm hunting. And by doing this alone, you will limit participation of other hunters substantially because they typically don't like doing this either. So I wanted to go to the mountains. I went to Buffalo Cove. Well, obviously, there's a picture of the PDF. You can see camping areas, parking lots, you know, all the different features and a legend there. And on any game land, you're going to see this. And I have a little caveat. You're going to see it coming up. It's typically a presentation I give in programming. A diamond sign most likely, but not always, and these two red markers. There is a disclaimer. At times the trees fall, and if the agency isn't quick to catching up on it, you may not see the border. 30 years ago, that would have been an excuse. You could say to the enforcement officer, well, I didn't know I was off the property. It's not the case today, especially with the apps that we have. Obviously, you already heard about Avenza, and you'll see the connection I'll make with that. But those geo-referenced PDFs, you can open them up in Avenza. You just download it to your email on your phone, open it up with Avenza, boom, you've got a GPS. As easy as that. And that will keep you on the border. It's the lesser of the two, which is the other one that was already mentioned. That's going to come up. But still a great mapping program. I use it myself. And I primarily still rely on a handheld GPS. Old school, hashtag old guy. I like that handheld GPS, been carrying it forever. That's like my dog, so to speak. But you don't have to feed it except for batteries. OnX. Super popular today, and as you heard earlier too, private land, public land, you can tell when you're on and off. This is what everybody wants. I have it on my phone, but I'm just learning it. I'm still stuck with the GPS. Again, permit opportunities, you already heard from Mike. This is a situation where on some but not all game lands, and it is in the Regs Digest and the game land information, as well as how many days a week you can hunt there. It's in parentheses. It'll typically say anywhere from 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These are certain game lands that say have had a lot of activity, meaning a lot of hunter pressure, and it's by drawing. $8 permit, you're not guaranteed, but these are even very popular with staff. So something to look into. How many here have used? Yes, okay, so some folks already know. In fact, I didn't get it asked it up front. I got carried away on the turkeys. How many here have never hunted? Okay, so we have at least 2 people. How many relatively new hunters? Okay. Just like to get on that. I'm sorry?
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
On the permits, they used to do like a pamphlet. Do we still have that?
It is. It's online now.
Okay.
So you can see it. In fact, I might have had it. Yeah, there it is. It's a book. And it shows them. And what I will say here for the quail, which I don't usually look for, again, starts with a T, turkey. The deadline is 10/1, what I'm seeing. So I haven't looked at all of them, but I think that's for all the permits. Mike probably would know that. And so you still have time.
Next weekend.
Yes.
No, it's tomorrow.
Tomorrow, that's right. See, there you go. Hop on, if you want to check the permits out. And again, very popular with folks. These are Dietz public land tips, and I've often sent this out to people, but usually in much more lengthy form of how I do it and how I recommend, even if someone comes from another state, does it. And it's relatively easy. So as you can see, it's not really that difficult online. It's just a lot of folks don't, or some folks are intimidated. Who here is intimidated about public land? Raise your hand. Like afraid of crowding. Hey, most people aren't. When I was involved in in-person seminars, they were killed by COVID, essentially. Now it's webinars and these other workshops that I'm involved in. The majority of people hunted private property. Again, you already heard my story about I want to roam more. People will say, oh, it's crowded. Well, usually on a weekend, opening week, things like that. But if you schedule times during the week and later in the season, you can have it often to yourself. And I've already driven to a parking lot in the Piedmont. Nobody was there on the first day of deer season. And I'm like, I have the day wrong. But I didn't. And I say that because, as I'll mention in the upcoming presentation, latest numbers I remember for North Carolina participation from 2011, 335,000 people participated. 335,000. At the early part of my hunting career in Pennsylvania, we boasted over 1 million people participating. So North Carolina is a third of that with the same amount of game lands. I knew what it was like to hunt with hunters, but I knew how to use hunters to avoid their pressure. And I heard it earlier, don't always choose the parking area. There's typically other areas that are off the parking area where you can come in from behind. You can be set up really early, and again, I'm kind of in the big game mode, but then hunters would move deer to me. I was out of my pickup 2:30 in the morning, carrying a tree stand, all my gear, a change of clothes, food, everything I needed, about 1.5 miles away up on a ridgetop. I was in the tree 45 minutes before daylight, and then all of a sudden that it started to get light. I would hear the gravel from the cars coming in, and I would be like this. Yes, here it goes. They're going to move deer to me. So keep that in mind. Maybe a little bit different with quail. But anyway, interactive map and georeference PDF, seek interactive map coordinates, and I'm going to go through each of these steps. Study the area topography, as you already heard, via Google Map and Earth. Print out, download the PDFs. I like to hold a hand map and then also have a Venza or use Onyx. And as you already know, and I think that's coming up too, or I already went over it, but when you're looking at that interactive map, that very corner on the bottom, I think it's coming up. I don't want to get ahead of myself. And obviously then put boots on the ground. So there it is, bouncing back to that interactive map, view PDFs. That is finger step 1. Don't go out, fingers, let your fingers do the walking. Finger step 2, that's the point I wanted to make that I almost forgot. So that parking lot right there is referenced right down there, GPS coordinates. And even if you only use the navigation app on your phone by itself, you put those digits in the phone navigation app, not an address, the digits, and it will drive you to that parking lot, even though I'll try to access it from a different area without digging out ruts or anything else like that. Now make sure you write it in your phone exactly as it is, because if you missed the comma or the hyphen, you'll be in the Sahara Desert. And you probably won't get across the ocean, so you won't be able to do it. But it works. Finger step 3, there's an example where I just pulled up Tillery and was already mentioned with the Google Earth. You can see what the topography looks like, where the potential small game hunting areas are, or the dove fields. And this broadens the horizon, which means I can look at other land beyond that PDF map, just like on the interactive map. But I do like Google Earth. I can see what the topography looks like. And beyond that one, what I call my finger step 3.1, again being a deer, squirrel, turkey guy, I do not like, as was talked about earlier, for being poor habitat, monoculture pines. Granted, they provide some cover for snow, which usually don't happen in the Piedmont, also some protection from the heat, but not the best places to hunt. However, if you're looking on this, there's a road that basically goes through the pines, but look back in here, the hardwood strips, and that one actually follows a creek bottom, hence that timber doodle you guys were talking about, which is the woodcock. So whereas other hunters would say, it's all pines, I ain't getting out of the truck. You know this from looking in Google Earth. Boom, instant success. And obviously, I do that with the interactive map, or I mean the PDFs. I still like to print them out. In the Avenza, they work great. And with the boot steps, that's when we're finally on the ground, know where you are. As I indicated, a sign, 2 bands. If that falls down, you have these. And this is actually a scene from Virginia because I hunt multiple states. You got to stay off of that. No reason to be on that. It's unethical. It's somebody else's land. Back in the day, if a tree was down and a sign was down or somebody ripped, people used to rip signs down in my home state just so they could go in. Now there's no excuse. And an officer knows you have a mobile device. Everybody has one. So stay ethical. I say that. It is like any avocation in life. What you put into it, you will get out of it. And some people will fall into that bell curve differently, and you don't need to be an aggressive hunter to harvest game. I have some spots that I'll walk 50 yards, and I'll be in one of those little strips of woods off pines, and I almost feel cheated that I didn't get to change my clothes, wipe myself down with unscented baby wipes. Yeah, that's probably saying too much. But that would be my shower to get into my fresh clothes before I climbed in a tree. So you don't have to hunt aggressively or hard to be successful. You just got to stay at it and hunt when you can, as I heard earlier. Moving into the next section. This was a book by Dr. Bob Norton, Dr. Bob Jackson. I've used this slide forever. It was the basis for the Stages of the Hunter. Who remembers that from hunter education? Stages of the Hunter, and based on 5,000 hunter interviews. And I like what he said there about, caring about hunting, you have to speak your mind. I've been an advocate for hunting my whole life. It's always been my passion. And I'll tune just a little point of that to the end. So just a few things I'll be covering. Obviously here, hunter's evolution, the R3, why, how, and who, the growing pains relative to our program, what's ahead, and of course a GS opportunity for y'all coming up. So that's the days of yore. That's why I still had some pigment. I was a student at main campus Penn State. My friends come up to go to the Penn State game, which I never did. I was there 3.5 years. I was a 40-some-year-old student. I spent 25 years in manufacturing, and this I decided would be my real job. So they'd come up, I'd tailgate with them, and then I was in the woods and they went into the game. This, as I was telling, let me step back a little bit, sorry. This, as I was telling Hannah, his name was David Grove. He was my roommate at Penn State. And I had several roommates. I lived at the Penn State Deer Research Facility. And sadly, this guy was killed in the line of duty in 2011 in Pennsylvania. And it was a long time before any officers were. He was killed. Somebody jacklighting deer, a convicted felon. And this guy loved conservation. He was a deputy then. And it was just such a great loss. But really good friends come to see me. Hunter education circa 1972. That's what my books look like. I still have them. The card is a blue card. It didn't have a number on it back then. That was my rite of passage. That was the beginning of the rest of my life. I didn't realize it then. But now, as you folks know, the rite of passage is a cell phone and social media. And so that world that we once knew is kind of changing. Well, I call this the dinosaur. Still extremely valid. But it's the dinosaur. I call it the dinosaur. Still valid. It's a mandated program. But it was really designed to prevent us from shooting ourselves and others. It's primarily a safety program. That's what it was about. And we still need it. But the folks that I'm meeting now, these new 20-something, 30-somethings, 40-somethings, they need far more. And so here's an example of what they said. I don't know. I would think you guys can read that. I kind of make the font big so I can see it. But I'll just kind of review it. I've never hunted before, and I don't know anyone who hunts. I'll be taking the Hunter Ed course for the first time. Can you please send some info? And I'm an older female that is wanting to take up hunting. I have no mentor. I have taken the Hunter Ed class. I would really appreciate some help on hunting. Back when that program started, everybody had a mentor. It was the baby boomer generation. Everybody had somebody to hunt with. These folks don't today. So that's why I say this is valid. It's still great, but they need much more. And that's when these other types of programs, they're usually referred to as adult onset hunting, came in vogue, if you will. This is the contemporary hunter. And in fact, there are far more women getting into hunting now than there ever was. And in fact, years ago, guys would go to hunting camps to get away from the family. That changed. And in the GSOs, I've had as high as 40, 50%. So it's always welcoming for me to see that. And what we are lacking, still lacking, is female instructors. It's mostly dudes. And there is a statement, and you'll probably hear me say it again, if you can see it, you can be it. If you don't see yourself in an activity because it's all dudes or someone that doesn't look like you, it's not really that inviting. And so that's the way our mindset has to be moving forward. And it is part of what we do. And we've hired a diversity coordinator. We're trying to build up on that, and very important. So what resonates with a contemporary hunter? Well, I think you contemporary hunters already know it ain't that. My generation, it was. And I will argue, coming from the state of Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Texas had the greatest number of hunters annually. And everybody likes the rack bucks. And I will say you need something to stir the gravy. But that's not the motivation for hunting. The motivation is that. It's all about the food. And it's created a whole movement that fine dining and all those things. The only thing I don't like fine dining when you go out in the restaurant is they give you about that much wine in a glass. And I can remember telling a guy one time in a restaurant, fill it up. It's like $7 a glass, fill it up. So hence, hashtag old guy, you know. But what they also don't like is they don't like to be tagged with names. And I did this, I have no experience in marketing. I like to say that I'm a marketing hobbyist. But I created this locavore poster, Locavores Wanted. You know, just something snazzy. Well, it had very little impact. So they don't want to be called foodies. They don't want to be called omnivores or locavores or whatever. They just want to enjoy the food. So R3, why, how, and who. And by the way, as you already heard, R3 is recruitment, retention, and reactivation. What is R4? Retirement, right. Well, you know, and in our division leader wants to make R4 relevance, because that's part of it. You'll see that here in a second. And no, retirement's first, then relevance, right. Programming justification. I say this because we as a state agency can't just do things for the fun of it. There has to be some science tied to it, whether wildlife management science or the social sciences. And so all of this really began around the early 90s. 1975, 1980 was the greatest number of participating hunters, 17.1 million age 16 and older. If you included under age 16, and that's because you couldn't survey below 16 back then, now we do. If you include under 16, probably 20, 22 million, 8 to 10% of the population hunted. Well, that precipitous decline has been going on. In the latest report, which we're waiting for the 2022 report coming from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, it's a participation report. But the latest was 2016. Again, we'll see the next one soon. 11.5 million, and this is nationally, 4 to 5% of the population. And moving away from the rural areas, urbanization, habitat, all those things played a role. And like I said, hunter ed, rite of passage, no longer hunter ed, other things, and people got away from it. We lost a whole generation of hunters. So looking at North Carolina, people like to see about North Carolina. Well, thinking in terms of license holders, yeah, continually going up. Roughly about 700,000 there, roughly from 2021. It's a great thing. Most lifetime licenses are in there. How many people own lifetime license? Oh, it's a hit down here. It's like a song, like a really good song. I won't mention it because it'll be an old one from my era. But people buy them for infants that oftentimes will not use them. And obviously every year we clean some folks out, you know, that are no longer in the system. But when you look at active participation, and that's what the survey looks at and that's what we look at, less than half, roughly about 300,000. 2011, It was 335,000. I believe it was in 2021, 315,000, and now we're looking at some recents, roughly 300. I'm liking to think there's going to be an uptick coming next, but won't get ahead of myself. This represents the greatest generation of North American hunters of all time, i.e. the baby boomer. That group that I belong to, those born before 1947 and 1964. Greatest number of modern-day North American hunters of all time, and we are dropping off the grid fast. Meaning right there at about 63, my age, either due to health problems or just no interest anymore. That is a huge conservation cohort. It's not just about relevance to what we do and the fact that we enjoy hunting, but also conservation funding. And as many of you know, likely if you've looked into this, that Pittman-Robertson funding, 1937, wildlife restoration, Dingell-Johnson, 1950, fish restoration, have been that excise tax that has never been replicated and probably never will. And so agencies are looking at, well, if we lose these activities, hunting and angling, how's it going to affect? Now, one of the things that's contributing on the PR side, and who can tell me, who is making up for hunters and or probably exceeding them on the PR side? What recreationist? Shooters. Big time. So there's that. Let's look at the whole North Carolina population as a whole. As you know, and I don't need to tell you, I live in Raleigh and I see houses replacing wildlife habitat all the time, and it makes me angry. There is the population. So now you look at those license holders and you look at the hunters. What I do like about that, as the hunter engagement coordinator, it is relatively stable. Stable is not a bad thing because many states are not having stable. And I think a lot of that is due to people like myself that are coming from other states. So we're kind of replacing what we're losing because people come here for work. So that makes sense. Well, you remember what I talked about, the percentage that hunts. So I did a little math, very easy math. In 2021, 300,000 hunters, you already saw that, participating hunters, 10.6 million population. You can see the number. Hunters in North Carolina represent 2.9% of the population overall. That's dipping low. That's a very small minority. And there's a concern too, in a democratic society, lower numbers is a lower majority. So moving on within this, we in the Wildlife Education Division Hub now, in the division are having this relevancy to make our division as well as other divisions relevant. Well, that's a very important term because when you look down here, to know the relevance of something is to know why it matters and how it's important. Kind of thinking in terms of hunting. I don't understand, like this statement, I don't understand the relevancy of this discussion. It doesn't seem important to me. Hence, if you don't participate, if you're not involved, just like this group, passionate about the outdoors, conservation organizations, it really doesn't matter, hence it lacks relevance. And that's an issue. How many people think that anti-hunting will destroy hunting? Raise your hand. Yeah, nobody. Well, you're right. When I first got this position, I had 2 interviewers. And they asked me the question, and this was 2008. I started out as a wildlife technician on the coast. I was only there 6 months, got this job. They said, how much time are you going to spend on the anti-hunting public? And I'm like, wow, I didn't study for this one. I said 10%. They said less than 3%. And of course, I would come to discover I was statewide so many times with the seminars, statewide webinars, now moving throughout the state, never once had an incident. And as you've likely heard, 78%, roughly 78 to 80% of the population does not hunt, but they do not have a problem with it either. If we lose it, we will lose it by attrition. That's the biggest concern. So getting back to that, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service shows that today, and that was 2018 when that came out, only 5% of Americans 16 and older hunted. Obviously, we already mentioned that. That's half of what it was 50 years ago, and the decline is experienced to accelerate over the next decade. One of the reasons for these positions. You already saw those numbers, so you can see where we at, or even in state. I like to think we're healthy, especially with stabilized numbers. But again, will we be seen as viable? Hey, hardly anybody hunts in the state. Why are we still doing this? You know, not anti, not any of that, but the political clout. So here's your first takeaway. We cannot expect to grow hunting without first increasing actual dependence of our pastime. No one will hunt in a society that increasingly does not accept it. Getting back to the point of, if you don't see yourself doing it, it really doesn't matter to you. And so that is our goal, not only to increase, rather beyond all just males teaching it, females, female instructors, and of other ethnicity, not just people that look like us. We've always been a melting pot. We are even more so now, and that's where we need to be involved in the marketing. GSOs and webinars, my two primary realms. Webinars obviously replaced in-person seminars. When COVID hit, I was in Bolivia I had done 5 of roughly 10 or 12 seminars, and they said, Dietz, shut it down. Okay, can't do it. So I immediately thought, well, what else can be done? Webinars. So to me, COVID inspired, Dietz desired. Why? You can reach a far greater audience and nobody has to travel. If you can't be there, you can see the recording, and that's what it is. Now, some people still like the in-person, but that's where the GSO comes into play. So, very effective, can reach far more people, and for both novice and experienced hunters. And my argument there is, it's easy to transition, say, a quail hunter to a turkey hunter or to a deer hunter or to another small game hunter with a webinar because they already know the basics. Or transfer them into any other species. They already know typically how to shoot, how to scout, how to recover game, maybe how to use a tree stand if it's deer hunting. The GSOs are far more basic and teach all those things to people that did not grow up in a hunting community. And thereby, it has a target audience. They are experiments to offset participation decline. Will they work? Only time will tell. That is the baby dinosaur. So we'll see what happens with that. And other states are doing similar things. One of the most powerful things I heard from someone from another state was Keith Warnke when he came to an event we had in 2012. And I think most of you can probably read that. And for those that are probably off to the angle, Wisconsin's current stance on recruitment, retention, and reactivation is to slow the decline. When I heard that, I got the chills, and when I say it, I get the chills. Is that reality? I don't know, but not on our dime. That's our argument. Not on our time. So online webinars, virtual, all skill levels, no attendee requirements. All you got to do is sign up. And we have a new system now. It's called Go Outdoors. It's a struggle for some of us. It has its challenges, but it's getting better. But it's going to help us to be able to do the social sciences, too, that matter so much now. GSO, there's the attendee requirements. Never hunted or have not actively hunted for more than 3 years. Lacking social support, meaning you didn't grow up in a hunting family. Lapsed, and we threw this in later on, a little bit more of a boost for even retention for those hunters that haven't hunted for a long time, and especially who have never harvested big game. When we started out, and you'll see that in a second, the first GSO, demand was turkey and deer's always been number one. As I like to say, they want to fill the freezers, not necessarily have the hors d'oeuvres right away, like squirrels and quail and everything else. And it was people during COVID that reached out to me and said, hey, I need to feed my family, I want to get a deer. And that's what really came out. And obviously, prerequisites for the GSO2 have to be hunter safety certified. That way we don't have to beat you to death with safety when you come to the workshop, because you will be shooting, and a valid North Carolina hunting license. That way you can hit the ground running. And for reasons of evaluation, you'll see that in a second. And that's for those needing it most. A very basic workshop that most hunters would come to and say, well, I already know how to do this. But for them, it's great. This name from GSO, I established that way back when. They want to change it to Learn to Hunt. Most other states call it Learn to Hunt. Figure it's more intuitive. And so as far as I was concerned, that's fine, as long as the program goes on. That's a typical agenda for like a deer, and we will be doing, and I'll be mentioning it, an upland GSO. And that was one of the things I like about, obviously, Mike introduced me to Jim, and then Jim, yep, and I saw Mike's hand go up. And unless you were going to say something. Were you going to say something, Mike?
No, sir.
Okay. And then we talked, and what I like to do with partners, future partners now, is create reciprocity. You bet I'll be here, and here's what we want to do later on. That way we can continue to build on it. It's a fire hose. We throw a fire hose at you, lots of information, and then with some of the species, there is more steps, and that is important. As my first supervisor told me, Brad Gunn, and our agency continues to try to get on ball with it, is to evaluate our programming. Hence, going back to that science thing. So there is a pre-workshop knowledge skill assessment, meaning we want to establish your baseline. Then, after the event, there's a post-workshop assessment, skills and knowledge assessment. Well, let's say you came in there, knew nothing, and you leave and know nothing. Whose fault is that? The buck stops here, right? So to find out, is the program really working? And then the other thing is, since you already have a license, we can track you over time. Only we won't be as annoying as, say, when you go in the store and they come out, how did you like so-and-so? How did you like this? Yeah, you can't like go anywhere. This is just for us to watch the numbers. You start out, you bought a license, okay? Maybe you missed a year, you bought another one. Then if you all of a sudden go off the grid, we can say, yo, BTW. You guys know what that means, right? See, I'm trying to be hip as a young person. I guess it's not working. By the way, you stopped hunting, here's another program or something like that. Here I thought, see, I didn't think I was cool anymore, but I guess, I don't know. That's what I figured, yeah. Hey, it's just funny short story. We still are good on time, right?
Yeah, you're up about 8 minutes.
Okay, well, that's good on time. Anyway, I heard one time at a workshop, Conservation Leaders for Tomorrow. It's a national program, hunter awareness, angling awareness, trapping awareness. I was telling a story, and I made a funny joke, because one of my first jobs, I spent 25 years in manufacturing, was making women's shoes. And I was trying to make a funny joke. I said, yeah, I sold women's shoes, and I made women's shoes, and Al Bundy sold them. And nobody laughed. And the instructor goes, Dee, they don't even know who Al Bundy is. So, okay, I get it. So, to the point, we don't know what we don't know until we know it. That's why we evaluate. GSO Plus is going to be new for 2024, and that's to expand on existing topics where people need more, whether it be scouting or tree stands and things like that. Something we're working on. And also post-GSO hunts. These are very much a limiting factor because the workshop is a training workshop, not a hunt. And then afterwards, we want to have hunts. And right now, because of the lack of volunteers, we want to build that social support. There's typically a limited amount. These are all organizations that compete with GSO, but even within those organizations, it's typically just a handful of people. It's like the church thing, you know, where you'll have a lot more people, but typically only a few that get involved. Wood Duck Farm is our flagship GSO. It's in our magazine this month. Promo for the magazine, Mike? No. I didn't bring it, though. But their GSO, you have the landowner, you have the conservation partner hosting a GSO workshop. And that way we get the broader conservation community involved. This is a group, I don't know how that text got wonky, I'll look at that later, but there are 3 entities that came together after the GSO. That's a big brush sweep. Then they can go to this next mom and pops organization, and they have additional webinars. They have additional field days. And then finally to another organization, Opportunity Outdoors, and here's the sheets. Learn to Hunt Deer is one of those. They can go to the GSO to there. Then they can go to this, and where they'll have public link game lands hunts where everybody gets together. They have a night spent of talking and sharing, and then they just scatter during the day. And this, I'm discovering, is far more of the modern day hunters. They're far more social than we were. The RV industry that I spent 21 years in, building Fleetwood motorhomes, and then as a supervisor, if you come in and you said you got a deer, and somebody said to you, where'd you get that? You would say, in the woods. If you harvested a nice fish, where'd you get that? In a stream, where these folks are more apt to share, but not, as was said earlier, GPS coordinates. Growing pains, limiting factors. I'm basically that dude. One-man band, and I have volunteers. And as I always say, those volunteers make me work harder for what I do because they give of their time, their talent, and sometimes dime. So I'm always humbled when I'm around a group of people that are in this for the passion. That came later for me. No WRC fests. I say this because many of our programs in the past had staff only. And it was great because staff were reliable, but the problem was if we don't reach out to the broader conservation community, we will lose by attrition. And as I pointed out, that CLFT program, that program was established because whether the natural resource majors or state and federal agencies, people that are entering those now, less than half hunt. So it continues to show there. And we can even see in our agency, less people are hunters and anglers. So no WRC fests involve the conservation community. And obviously creating some information here about getting the landowners involved and posting it and having available and even a QR code on that, believe it or not, and I'm not a QR code person. Obviously, there's always room for more, so yeah, please come knocking on our door. There's opportunities to volunteer, definitely within my realm and within others. And as I said, volunteer support, GSO instructors and hunt mentors, and applicable venues. You want to join the team? My alias is GSO, Getting Started Outdoors, at ncwildlife.org. And just a few considerations, acknowledge whether GSO or webinar and species of interest. Attend a live or virtual session is a good thing to do, pre-event if you can, or we can do a Zoom thing. Use of personal equipment for training is usually preferred because it's your own stuff. Logistics assistance, even if you don't hunt, helping with the things that go on during the day, and we do collect the in-kind hours that turn into additional federal funding. GSO 2017 1, 2024 probably 15, foot's been on the gas pedal. Hunting webinars fall 2022, probably 12 in 2024. GSO Plus, plan on having a bunch of them, and obviously the mentored hunts. So as I told my supervisor, who was relatively new, I'm going out with a bang. I'm going to make sure my successor has lots to do. There won't be like, what am I going to do next? You'll have plenty. Here's the invitation. There are 10 student slots available for this GSO. Do you really have to be a student? No, but that's where you'll need the requirements. Shooting instructors, logistics assistants also needed. It's going to be at Lentz, so very close by, as you can see. And observers are welcome too. Why? Because you may decide, this is kind of neat, I'd like to attend in the future or whatever. So we wouldn't turn anybody away. If you absolutely want to be a student, which you don't have to, attendance is free, but as you saw, qualifications, new to hunting, minimal experience, lacking social support, and you will need to complete the hunter education certification and have a valid hunting license. Obviously, we have snacks, water, and coffee will be available, but bring your own lunch. We've been under risk assessments for many years. I was serving chili to the tune of 6 crock pots, deer chili, not that cow or pig stuff, deer chili, but of course can't cook anymore. So yeah, we did away with it. And typically in the past, state agencies didn't cook anyway. If you're interested, you can let us know today or gso@ncwildlife.org, or you can let Jim know. But yeah, come one, come all. First Upland workshop, thanks to Jim and Lee, and Mike said he won't be there, but yeah, we're going to have some staff, but we could also use some volunteer help. Obviously interested GSO. As I add to my right next to the question slide, I like to say that, again, starting hunting in 1972, Uncle introduced me to hunting. I was a cradle hunter. I went through all the stages of shooting, of limiting out. My brother got the first rabbit, I was jealous. You work your way up the trophy, method stage, and then you reach that sports person stage. I've since become an advocate for wildlife, and I still hunt. If it was up to me, we'd be building up to live and down into the ground 60 stories. Human prosperity is a double-edged sword, and each year more and more wildlife habitat get eroded. So you'll see me as a volunteer both on the advocacy side and obviously to continue hunting. But there's no greater gift than obviously being connected to, to wildlife and conservation these days. Before I just do a question, I want to share a little tidbit, personal story. When I do get that turkey, we think about how it's so easy to throw food away. We go through the drive-thru, or we go in a restaurant, or even people that don't eat leftovers. Lots of people don't eat leftovers. To my point, it's easy to throw it in the trash. It smells bad. I make several different things out of turkey, but one thing I make is a big meatloaf out of 2 turkey breasts. I mean, it's huge, because a wild turkey has a big breast. So I'll have that, and I'll feed off it like a jungle cat in the refrigerator every day. Wild game and veggies, I'm like the dog, the tail's wagging, so I can relate to that. Well, I got down to this portion-sized piece that was about this big. It's probably in the fridge about 2 weeks. So I did what anybody else would do. Went like this, and it was right on the edge. You know what I mean? I immediately was taken to that spring green field in these unbudded woods in Virginia, when that big, strutting, magnificent, dominant gobbler, just like a quail or a woodcock, was coming in to the gun, and I didn't have the heart to do it. I couldn't throw it in the trash. And I lived by myself. So, what did I do? Threw it in the microwave, 1 minute, it was like the day I made it, and I gobbled it right down. So, my point of bringing that up is, there is definitely that intimate connection. And it is such a paradox. How can you kill the things you love? There's a rabbit been in my neighborhood coming to the house. I would see him in the yard every day. He was like my friend. And he got hit by a car the other day. I was depressed. So how can you love things and yet kill them? But there's that intimate connection to the food that cannot be found in our modern industrialized world. Boom, that's it. Any questions? Well, he was kind of sitting for a little longer than my stuff in the refrigerator, but yeah, it was a sad fact.
Hey, Dee, I want to leave everybody with one thing. Sometimes when you hear a saying or something and it resonates, and this is going to back up what Wes and everybody else has been talking about. I heard a football coach talking to his team on a web thing, and he said, "Don't lean on a shovel and pray for a ditch."
And yeah.
That's bird hunting. My buddy Jesse Grimes said, legs kill birds.
Yeah. And it's also advocacy. Who can tell me where that was? Who can tell me where that picture was taken? And I'll give you one hint if you can't get it. Well, yeah, mountains. That's like that place where to hunt.
That's right.
Huh?
Hanging rock.
What?
Hanging rock.
No, but you're kind of close. 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 Highest point east of the Mississippi. When I went up there, that was it. I melted, even though the snow was starting to melt too. But I typically bear hunt out there, so it's a beautiful way.
Anybody else have any more questions for Dee?
Okay.
Did you get sick?
What's that?
Did you get sick?
All right, what?
After the meatloaf, did you get sick?
Oh, absolutely not. I also have the constitution of a mutt dog.